Hello, America. Hey, it's Big Lou here, coming to you from the Old Guy Network in sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. And what a great day it is. It's Christmas week, and everybody seems to be in a much better mood. They're smiling, they're happy. What a great time of year. So, I got a couple questions to ask you. Are you running a business that's facing labor shortages? Are your workers having a hard time committing to your brand? Do you find your workforce turns over quicker than ever before? Or are you thinking about starting a business and unsure of how to design and develop a good team? Well, guess what? Today's your lucky day. Why? Well, it's Wednesday. And Wednesday in the Old Guy Network is Teamwork Day. And what we like to say around here is business is a team sport. Now, out of everything that we talk about in the Genesis plan, this is my favorite area to talk about. And why is teamwork my favorite subject in the Genesis plan? Well, it's the most fun because I'm a storyteller. And there are so many incredible stories centered around teamwork that every time I hear another one, it just gets me more inspired. And, you know, we all have heard all the cliches. There is no I in team, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of different teamwork cliches, but they're built around some pretty fundamental truths. I want to talk a little bit today more about the stories centered around teamwork and less around theory, because I don't think anybody's theory on teamwork is any more accurate than another person's. So I don't think that we can base a lot of our thought process on some crazy design that's been predetermined. I think that the strategies towards teamwork are as wide and varied as there are teams. So, what makes me an expert at teamwork? Well, I don't know if I'm an expert, but I can tell you I have a lot of experience, and it goes right back to basically my very early childhood. I grew up in a family of four kids, and we had a very large extended family. I come from Italian immigrants who all moved into the same neighborhood. And essentially, we were a team from the minute I was born. We had neighbors all around us that were related to us. We lived in a house where two doors from me was my grandmother, across the street was my Aunt Mary, behind my grandmother was my Aunt Jean. Around the corner was my Uncle Tony, around the other corner was my Uncle Nicky. Down the street from him was Uncle Jimmy, and Uncle Joe lived around the corner. Everybody lived in the neighborhood, and they all had a gaggle of kids. So we were a pretty big team when I was growing up. And the funny thing about it is that that team was part of the fabric of everyday life. Everybody had a job to do, and they did it in a way that pretty much exemplified what real teamwork does and what real teamwork can accomplish. So, in that neighborhood, my first real taste of controlling a team or being involved in an organized team was we played sports. And well, what sports? I mean, anything that there was a ball involved. We played baseball, we played basketball, we played football, we played tennis, we played soccer, we played ping pong. Anything that had a round ball, we played it. And every one of those sports that we played somehow or another required us to end up in teams. And so, and what American kid didn't? The first thing you learn in playing sports is how to select your team. I mean, I'll never forget the day that I first picked up the baseball bat, and it happened to be the captain on one side and the other captain on the other side, and we went one hand over the other until we got to the top, and whoever ended up at the top, they had the first pick. And we went down the line and used our selective prowess to pick the best team that would give us the ability to win. And so, after trial and error, many, many times we got better and better at it in selecting our teams, regardless of what the sport was. I don't think we used the baseball bat when we picked the football teams, but we had some process that we had to go through. Anyway, as I grew up and participated in sports all through school and even in college, I realized how important a team really was. And understanding that the role of each one of your teammates is dependent on each other. So I really got a good dose of it when I became the my youngest brother's little league coach. My dad passed away when he was about, I want to say, 8 years old, and so I became the guy that filled in as the little league coach there. And I recall the first season I got involved in it. I had a cousin that actually helped me, and so we were a coach, assistant coach tandem, young guys. We were young. We were the youngest of all. The rest of the coaches were basically fathers. But we thought we had one up on the fathers because we were young. We had experience playing and recent experience and all of the you know advantages of learning new and innovative ways. Well, when all those kids showed up at the field, my cousin looked at me and I looked at him, and we sent him out onto the ball field just to kind of warm up. And it was, needless to say, 5 minutes of complete confusion on our behalf. Ernie looked at me and I looked back at him and he said, "Are you kidding? We're in trouble. These kids don't know how to do anything." And I said, "Well, let's pump the brakes. We'll figure it out. We just have to put these guys in the right position." And we started from scratch. And the one example that stands out the most with me is we had a kid he was the tallest boy, and he had a funky looking baseball mitt. I don't know, he must have had his grandfather's baseball mitt. And he just so happened to be a left-hander. He was a southpaw. And in fact, the glove he had, I wasn't even sure whether or not it was a lefty's glove. But that being said, I said, and I can't even recall the kid's name, but he was wearing glasses, and I think that may have been half of his problem because the glasses might not have been corrective for a distance. Maybe they were reading glasses or whatever. But he seemed to miss everything that was thrown at him. And I told him to come over to me, and I said, "You're going to play first base." My cousin pulled me aside almost immediately, and he looked at me and said, "Are you crazy? This kid, he can't catch anything." He says he'll never be able to field the ball. I said, "Look, we can teach him how to catch. We can't teach him how to be left-handed. He's already left-handed. And that's the cardinal rule. We didn't have any other left-handers. He's the first baseman." Well, we went about and put most of our kids in the positions we thought that would give us the best chance to win. And we happen to have a couple of ringers that were pretty good athletes, and so they became pitcher and catcher. And after we finished our first practice, he said, "Do you really think we need?" I think the kid's name was Di Pasquale. It was his last name. I don't remember his first name, but anyway, he said, "Do you really want to keep this Di Pasquale kid as the first baseman?" I said, "Look it, with our pitcher and catcher, how many times do you think there's going to be a play to first base? This pitcher's going to strike out 4 out of 5 of the batters. If we just tell our infielders, don't make a bad throw, let the guy take a single, get him there." Well, as it turned out, that young man turned out to be one heck of a first baseman. By midseason, he was catching everything in practice, and he was making some plays during the game. And the fact that we put him at first base, which was a big responsibility to those kids at the time, gave him the confidence to be better at his position. And so I learned a valuable lesson myself. I tried it. I didn't know if it was going to work at the time, but it did. And the lesson I learned wasn't even anything that I intended. I was just playing the odds. I had no idea that this young man was going to turn out to be as good as he was. He went on to play baseball, and he actually continued. I think he continued to play maybe into college, but I saw him many years later after he was a grown man. He came up to me and he said, "You know, I still remember when you were my coach, and I really didn't want to play baseball back then, and my parents made me do it. But that year that I played with you, that started everything out." Now that was an inspirational thing and a great reward on my behalf. So assigning positions is fundamentally one of the most important things to do in your business. And using sports metaphors just make the stories easier for me to tell. The next story I'm going to tell about is during my professional career, I started working with a developer contractor construction company, and the fellow I worked with was an extraordinary individual. He wasn't a typical businessman. He came from a construction background. His father was a mason contractor. When he got out of school, he decided he didn't want to follow in his father's footsteps, bought some heavy equipment, and started his own construction concern, running construction equipment, heavy equipment, started doing utilities, and then before you know it, he was off to the races. Well, he was also kind of a maverick. He was one of the founders of a motorcycle club similar to the Hells Angels, that kind of thing. And he was all about teams, particularly in the club. The club is a brotherhood. I think the name of the name of the club was the Brotherhood. So that'll let you know how important teams were back then. It was a brotherhood. Well, I signed on with him after a certain period of time because a very good friend of mine went over to be with him as an executive. And I signed on with him to run all the constructions company. We were pretty young too at the time, but we had an incredible amount of work. As it turned out, the local industry didn't think we were players, but it just so happened that one thing led to another, and before you know it, we were doing 3 times the amount of work that all the rest of the competition was doing in that area at the time. And I owe the credit to Louis Baquetta, that was the gentleman's name, for understanding what it meant to create a team and then let the team do their job. And, it was funny because he had odd hours. And as I say, he had an odd personality. Not, I shouldn't even say odd, just not typical. But he was an impressive guy. And the one thing that he did know is how to assemble the team in the right way. And everybody had their department to control, and everybody was expected to produce in their department. But he also elected to reward people in very special ways. And he did that. He found out what your passion was. One guy loved boating, and he controlled a large um, area of the company, a large department in the company, and he had a lot of responsibility, worked a lot of hours, and so on and so forth. After about 5 or 6 years, um, Louis bought him a boat, and I'm not talking about a paddle boat. He bought him a cabin cruiser, and so um, he worked hard. His department was successful, it was profitable, and he was rewarded for that. And every one of the team leaders was rewarded in their own special way. So I want to make sure that I give credit to one of the influencers when it comes to teamwork. In doing that, I want to say that it impacted the way I approach team today. And I look at it this way. There's two strategies in developing a team. And of course, it's pivotal around leadership. Leadership is what it's all about. And there's two different ways to lead a team. And I break it down this way. You can run a team like the military does, where you have your generals at the top, and then below that, there's a hierarchy of leadership until you get to the ground level. If you're in the Army, you start out with a general and you end up with privates. And along the way, there's various levels of leadership. Now, that type of leadership requires certain elements in order to be successful. And in many circumstances, that works very well. The other approach, which I prefer to take, is that of an orchestra. And in the leadership role, it's the conductor of the orchestra that is at the top. And when he gets in front of that orchestra, he works from his plan, his program, his sheet of music. And when it's time for the violins to come in, he ushers them in. And when it's time for the horns to come in, he ushers them in. And when it's time for the percussion to perform, he brings them in. And he raises the vibrato and lowers the amplitude at the right times. And perhaps from a leadership role, the conductor is a lot more involved in the overall strategy with his team than the general may be in the military version. I just know one thing, that when it comes to teamwork, if you've ever listened to a very good symphony orchestra, that's just a beautiful thing. So I want to end on that note when it comes to teamwork and just relate to you that all of our future Wednesdays will not have me talking for 20 minutes, but they will be interviews with individuals that have been in business and have created teams, and not just typical business. We have sports figures that have been members of teams slated for discussions. So we have a lot of interesting people that we'll be interviewing, talking about the way they manage, develop, create their teams, and incorporate them into their businesses. So um, we look forward to that. I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas. We will be talking to you one more time this week before Christmas comes around. So if some of you don't see us tomorrow, I wish you all a Merry Christmas. We will definitely, we're starting our interviews next week. So as always, I hope that you'll join us in our mission here at the Old Guy Network to make one person that you don't know smile every day. And that, folks, is the end of the story.